Hey everyone, welcome back. Certain comic book characters I've heard throughout the years, and at one point I suppose I kind of, in my childlike mind, I believe this, are very popular if they're relatable. So the more relatable the character, the more popular they tend to be in the comic book psyche, which is why I suppose people try and explain the huge success of characters like Batman and Spider-Man, and I suppose more recently Iron Man. Um, Now I don't know about you, but my seasoned mind, when I look at these characters, I'm struggling to find how to relate to them beyond the fact that these characters are human. They're not mutants. They're not aliens from a different planet. Well, I mean, aliens are usually from a different planet, unless you're like a legal alien, in which case you're from a different country. Anyway, the point is, being human, if that is the litmus test for what makes a character relatable, I think it's missing something. I really do. Because, I mean, if you really study the characters in some detail, just how much in common do you have with them? I'm equating commonality with relatability, right? So let's look at the Batman. One of the most famous, successful, you know, characters the whole world knows about Batman, not just through his comics, but through his numerous movies and merchandise and everything else that goes with the Batman, mythos. Now, how there's Bruce Wayne and then there's Batman, right? How relatable is either of those characters? Now let's take I say personas. I mean, it's one character, right? How relatable are either of those personas? So if we look at Bruce Wayne, let's take this off, shall we? He is a multi-billionaire. Um, I am not, and many people that I know who love Batman are not. In fact, everyone that I know who loves Batman isn't a multi-billionaire. Chances are that if you're listening in to this, you're probably not a multi-billionaire. But if you are, I think you're the exception to the rule. Accept my apologies. Yeah, yeah. I would say the majority of the readership, it doesn't fall into the multi-billionaire, super wealthy category. I mean, you might be doing okay, you might be comfortable, but not Bruce Wayne level of comfort. Uh, he has a butler. I've never had a butler. None of the people that I know who are huge Batman freak fans have ever had butlers. I mean, what they say, and I kind of agree, when you're a young kid, you have parents who look after you. Your mummy basically cooks for you. She cleans your clothing. She cleans your room sometimes. I suppose that's like having a butler, but not quite the same thing, right? It just isn't. You can't go around calling your mum Alfred. That's not going to go down too well. Um, you know, he lives in a mansion, a huge mansion by himself. Well, by himself, him and his butler. Again, something that I just can't relate to. Um, his businesses, his business empire. Again, something that his society profile. All of these things, I think the average Batman reader really can't relate to. Beyond the fact that I'm human, Bruce Wayne, the character is meant to be human. So if you take the human thing, put that in one corner, yes, we both tick the same box. But beyond that, not really. I mean, no. No, I can't relate to anything that Bruce Wayne as a character sort of has. And then if you look at the alter ego of Batman, well, that's just on a whole different level altogether. I've never been trained by master assassin ninja fighters. They just never had the pleasure. I don't own a Batmobile. Listen, a 1990s Toyota Camry, black with tinted windows, can never count as the Batmobile. And for anyone who has that vehicle for that purpose, I'm sorry to burst your bubble. The illusion does not sell. Unfortunately, I wish it did. It just doesn't. I don't have a bat suit. I can't sort of jump from rooftop to rooftop using my batarang or my cloak. None of these things. I can't fight off 20 guys. I love to. I just can't do these things. And listen, if I fall from a building, or if I, get stuck on the head, or if I get stabbed, I'm not going to recover by being stitched up by my butler. I mean, I would have to go to the hospital. Anybody would. I mean, if that happens to you, happens to anyone you know, we're talking about a long rehabilitation in the hospital, and yeah. So that's these are all things that I really really can't um, relate to. If any one of you can, please let me know in the comments below, because I would love to know your tale. Just how closely do you fit in with the Batman's character? That is so cool. You're practically a real life superhero. This is great. I'm jealous, but I don't fit that mold. I can't relate to anything that is Bruce Wayne or that is Batman. So how do you explain how do you explain the fact that I love the character so much? It's not relatability. Like I say, I have nothing in common with either of them, Bruce or Bats. I don't have a bat cave. Oh man, I would love to have a bat cave. I think most people would love to have a bat cave. I think the best that you can do, if you're a bloke, or maybe if you're a lady as well, is to have a little man cave, or like a woman cave. Perhaps in a little corner of the house or in your garden shed. But that really isn't the same thing. I mean, it isn't. I wish it was. So I think I've now firmly established that no matter how hard you try, beyond the fact that if you're a multi-billionaire or a millionaire and you have a nice house and a black car, which is a Lamborghini that looks like the Batmobile, beyond those things, you just can't relate. And let's not forget about the horrendous backstory of Batman. I mean, I don't want to relate to his orphaned as a child when his parents were shot to death by a mugger. Who wants to relate to that? That's a horrible thing to relate to. So thank God, I think myself and perhaps a lot of you listening in, and the average readership does not relate to the childhood trauma that Bruce Wayne had to go through, or the subsequent years of training and lack of social life, lack of friends that he had to suffer in order to become the Batman. So yeah, no, not really. I'm not a huge fan of this relatability now. Actually, now I'm now thinking it's probably a good thing that I can't relate to the character. Yeah. If we move on to Peter Parker, aka Spider Man, funnily enough, it appears to be the case that Peter Parker is actually more of a relatable character than the entirely human Bruce Wayne. Um, and there's a number of reasons for that. And I'm talking about, in particular, I'm talking about the original Ditko Stan Lee version of Peter Parker, when Spider-Man was first introduced. And at that point, he was a very skinny, sort of geeky college student who would be picked on by, particularly Flash Thompson. The women that he liked weren't particularly interested in him. He was just an average guy, with glasses, living an average life in a pretty average neighborhood, which could be classed as working class, stroke, lower middle class, possibly. He lived with his uncle Ben and his aunt May. He was an orphan. His parents were killed in a supposed car accident, and this kind of stuff, I suppose, minus the tragedy, or perhaps even with the tragedy, people could relate to. I suppose that you do have orphans, who live with other family members, and if they read a character like Spider-Man, I suppose they could relate to it. It's not something that, of course, you'd want to be in such a position, but you could relate to if you were in that position. And of course, unlike Batman, he didn't get to see his parents get shot, so that was a small mercy. And many kids, I'm sure, could relate to going to college and being the geeky outsiders, right? I think many kids could relate to that. And, all of these things, I think, were a stroke of genius, because you're basically making a superpowered being more relatable, and I suppose, sort of, approachable as a character to normal everyday kids and adults. So yeah, stroke of genius. But there did come a point, I think, when the relatability stopped, um, especially after Peter Parker gains his superpowers. And of course, I suppose then the relatability would stop, wouldn't it? But it's not just in relation to Spider-Man. I think even with Peter Parker, the dynamic changed. I think after post Spider-Man powers, I think Peter Parker is a little less easy to relate to. Number one, because of all the tragedy that he's gone through, I think that alone would really mess you up, and it I don't know how many people can actually be such a punching bag and still in real life still sort of like manage to function on a normal everyday basis. I mean, if you take the fact that he lost. I mean, look, he lost his Uncle Ben to a mugging, right? He was shot by this mugger who Peter failed to stop in a fit of anger because he didn't deem it to be his problem. Now, imagine the guilt of having to live with that day in, day out. I mean, I know that that's what spurred him on to become Spider Man. With great power comes great responsibility, great speech, fantastic, love it. But he must wonder every single day, what if I had just stopped that thief? Just beaten him up, taken the gun, my Uncle Ben would still be alive. Maybe I'd be in a happier position. But no, he lives with the knowledge that due to his inaction, his Uncle Ben died. Dude, that would mess up 99% of the population, I'm sure. And yet, he was spurned on to greater things, which is great. I mean, is that relatable? I don't know if I was in that position, man. I'd be very screwed up. I would have difficulty operating after that. But okay, fine. Comic books, and it this tragedy made him stronger. All right, fine. I'll buy it. Then his he loses Gwen Stacy to the Hobgoblin, who turns out to be the father of his best friend. So Norman Osborn is a psycho, but his son Harry gets also influenced by the madness of his father, and so he ends up losing, really, in effect, his best friend Harry. I mean, good God, it just doesn't end. It doesn't end. His Aunt May seems to be always frail and ill, on the verge of death. I mean, there are certain depictions of Aunt May where she looks like she's about to fall keel over, and just die. I mean, imagine having to live with that. I got my uncle killed, and now my aunt's about to go. I have no parents. Oh my God. Oh my God. This sort of stuff, and yet he still manages to bounce back with quips and jokes when he's fighting bad guys. That's the other thing. I mean, look, how relatable is it that you're facing these horrendous, deadly situations? You could be killed any moment, and yet you're finding time to make jokes. My brain wouldn't operate. I mean, seriously, how relatable is that? It just wouldn't operate. When anyone who's been in an actual sort of situation with another person, whether it's a fight or an argument or whatever, it's very difficult to maintain a humorous demeanor. It really is. And so again, one could argue, well, he's a superhero, so maybe that's why. I don't know. I think for me the relatability stops there. I'm not trying to pick at loose threads here. I'm not. I'm just trying to think on a real and analytical basis. How relatable is he? But I think that post Spider-Man powers, not only Spider-Man as a character, but also Peter Parker, they do become a lot less relatable. But at the same time, such a popular character, such a popular character. And at the same time, I think more relatable as a character than Batman, which again, I'm absolutely surprised by due to the super nature of Spider Man. And who can forget Tony Stark, the one and only Iron Man? I mean, who can forget? Well, you can't forget him now, even if you wanted to. Ever since the MCU and Robert Downey Jr. sort of exploded this character onto the big screen, I think he's become the face of Marvel. Actually, in many respects, I think I genuinely believe that Robert Downey Jr.'s turn as Iron Man has actually done about as much for the character as Christopher Reeves did for Superman back in the 70s. It has been phenomenal how much popularity I think the figure has gained, even more so than in the comics, because of the portrayal by Robert Downey Jr. It's been phenomenal. But again, in relation to relatability, I mean, here's the funny thing. Even though the character, the suit itself is so fantastical, right? It's the stuff of science fiction. I suppose it's becoming science fact with all the reports you hear about, sort of inventors creating their own Iron Man suits, etc., etc. It's still a very fantastical notion. The idea of having this superpowered suit that can fight literal Norse gods, right, to a standstill and fight creatures like the Hulk, etc., etc. Um, I suppose the relatability comes from the fact that uh, Tony Stark is very much a human being who relies on this, in his own words, tin can suit, right? He's just a man in a tin can, as he once said. Um, and yes, sure, he doesn't have the training of ninja master sort of, craftsman, fighter, Buddhist monks. He doesn't have that. He doesn't. He doesn't have. Well, I suppose he has everything else. I mean, much like Bruce Wayne, I suppose he's got billions. He's got a massive, thriving business. Um, he has a building named after him, like Bruce Wayne does. There's a lot of similarities between Bruce Wayne and Tony Stark, but they obviously diverge in relation to the application of their wealth. Whereas Bruce has honed his body, what Tony Stark has done is it basically uses intellect to create this suit of armor, which of course makes him a lot more powerful than Batman. In a way, I suppose you could say that Tony Stark did the smarter thing. He actually created something that would genuinely protect him. I mean, the average the average Joe villain who gains an edge, like for example Bane by taking Venom, right? He caused a lot of trouble for Batman. Bane would have no trouble at all. He would be no trouble at all to Iron Man or Tony Stark in the Iron Man suit. What trouble is he going to be? Nothing. So yeah, one could argue that Tony is actually a much smarter guy in the way that he's utilized his wealth. I don't know why Batman didn't do that, but okay, he wants to he wants the delight of actually hearing the bones crunch underneath his feet or something maybe. But look, again, the billionaire lifestyle many people cannot relate to. I think many people want to relate to Tony Stark. I think when the Downey Jr. movie came out, he did such a great job of portraying Iron Man. Such a great job that everybody wanted to be Tony Stark. Everybody wanted to be Downey Jr. Tony Stark. I think people still do. I think many young people still do. I think many young kids want to do it. I think many people in their mid age fantasize about being Tony Stark. But fantasizing about being a character and being relatable to that character, or having that character be relatable to you, are two different things. And really, there's no relatability. There isn't. Like I say, no one, the billionaire element, the business element, the fact that he has this high tech gadgetry all around him. He presses a button and the suit kind of envelops him. Nanotechnology, yeah, all this stuff is completely unrelatable, guys. I'm so sorry for anyone who is fantasizing about being the next Tony Stark. I am so sorry. I am. It's not going to happen. It isn't, guys. It's not going to happen. I wish it could happen, but no. So yeah. Again, another prime example of a very supposedly relatable character because he's essentially a human being, but in reality completely unrelatable because of well, the factors just aren't there, right? Apart from the fact that he's human, nothing else clicks in terms of what you can relate to. So, what are we left with? Why are these characters so popular? Why are they so supposedly relatable? And I think it all comes down to the fact that they are human beings who have, in one way, shape, or form, reached a certain pinnacle that everybody wants to reach, but will probably never reach. But because they're human, because they are relying, apart from Peter Parker, of course, apart from Spider Man, because they're relying on these external things to help them. I think a lot of people think that, yeah, if only I had those things, I too could be, Iron Man. And again, I think Iron Man actually is more of a relatable character because Iron Man utilizes a suit of armor that augments his physical abilities, right? Or wait, they don't augment; they actually give him physical abilities. Whereas Batman just And so if Iron Man takes a beating, you can understand how he'd survive consistent beatings because he's covered in a suit of armor. Whereas Batman just like, spends his entire life doing nothing but just fighting and learning and being this Dark Knight. At least Tony Stark has a life and friends and gets to enjoy life. So yeah, I think he's a better character in that respect. Can't believe I'm saying this, but I think it's true. I think he's actual better character overall. But yeah, not relatable apart from the fact that he's human. So yeah, I think that when the writers sell this relatability point, it's based on the fact that it's just the human element, nothing else. And look, they're good characters, so they're enjoyable. Let's take what's his name, the Green Arrow or Hawkeye, archers, right? They're probably a little bit more relatable because you could learn archery and then go out and shoot an arrow and hit your target. I suppose those characters are pretty relatable. But then Hawkeye is popular, but not that popular. He's not like a. I suppose he's become more mainstream because of the MCU movies, but he never reached the heights of greatness in the comics. Green Arrow possibly did. He had his own series and still, I think, does. That's been going for a while. But in terms of sales, he can't compete with Batman. So the actual relatable characters, as in proper humans who use like a bow and arrow, not that popular in comparison. And the ones, yeah. So is it relatability? I don't know. I'm more confused now than when I started. I don't think that relatability has much to do with it, to be honest with you. I think it's some other X factor. But I think that promise of relatability, it's not the actual relatability, it's the promise of relatability. And I'm going to leave it at that, guys, because my brain is now about to explode. But listen, as ever, thank you for listening to me rambling on. I really appreciate your time. Like and subscribe if you will. And I will see you in the next one.